Hi, I'm Dave Merlino.
I'm Dustin Sweet, and this is the Know Their Story podcast. We talk to veterans about their time in service, returning home from war, and transitioning out of the military. Hopefully along the way we'll inspire you to do the same with a veteran in your life.
Because sometimes all it takes to make the world a better place is sitting down with a friend to know their story. Okay. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Know Their Story podcast. Thank you for joining us again. Had a little bit of a break as I pardon me, that was not planned. Little bout with coronavirus. So I will probably not talk as much because it leads to coughing this week, but I say I won't talk as much every week, and we know
It's
how
a
that
miracle.
goes. So, but Dustin, thank you for joining us again.
Thanks for having me one more time. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Let's have this party.
So today's guest, I was joking right before we hit record that we've had a couple, we've been hitting the Navy a lot lately. We're going back to our roots of the Army. Today's guest was an artillery surveyor in Vietnam, 1969 to 1970 with the U.S. Army, as I just mentioned. And also the author of the book Potato People, about tales from the trenches of his time in the Army. Please welcome Jack Schmitt. Thank you for joining us today, Jack.
Thank you, Dave. Nice to be with you.
Jack, where are you joining us from?
I'm in the western suburbs of Chicago.
Oh, nice. How's the weather in
Great,
Chicago?
very nice, pleasant day. It was rainy yesterday, but it's not today. Nice and sunny. Sunny at the moment, probably mid 70s.
Baseball weather.
Yes.
Stuff.
Yeah, well, I have to ask, if you were to go to a baseball game, would it be to the Cubs or the White Sox?
If I were to go, it would be Cubs.
Okay, there we go. My aunt is a diehard Cubs fan. I've actually been to a couple games at Wrigley with her.
Yeah.
So it was a fun time. They didn't win, and in fact, it was during the height of Sammy Sosa, and they were playing the Cardinals, and like they kept hitting home runs to go ahead, and then they'd give up a home run to tie it. We'd go into extra innings, and my aunt was just like, "Oh!" And I looked at my wife and I said, "Welcome to the life of a Cubs fan," right there.
That's right.
So I'm actually going to put myself on mute a little bit here. Dustin, I'll let you go. That way, when I cough, it won't tire.
Sure, that's good, Dave. Good thinking, Dave. Jack, let's get it started, I guess. What caused you to be in the recruiting office? How did you get into the Army?
Okay, I was attending junior college, finishing up my second year. I knew that as the oldest of six kids, I couldn't expect my parents to send me off to state college. So I ventured down to the enlistment office and said I wanted to get into something related to engineering, civil engineering specifically. So after a few meetings, I signed the papers and was able to finish my second year of college, and then went into the service in June of 70. Did my basic at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. I put in for construction survey school, but found out that school was closed. So they sent me to artillery survey school, which turned out to be much better because I learned how to operate all of the instruments, all of the surveying instruments, and relate to the computer coordinates of bringing in artillery fire and adjusting fire and reading maps and reading the stars. So I learned one heck of a lot. Then they sent me to Germany. And what we did was help various divisions. We helped the Big Red 1 get ready. I believe that might have been one of the first ones, but we helped the 24th Division get ready, but they were never sent. But we would zero in artillery, zero in Honest John rockets, just go to the range quite often in a place called Grafenbeer, and really get very comfortable reading a map, reading coordinates, adjusting fire, bringing either a single tube or 6 tubes in on target and adjusting each one so they could hit what they were supposed to hit. I got kind of tired of shining shoes and polishing belt buckles. So I listened to some of the vets and really believed that Nam was the place to be. So I put in for it, put in several times. They wouldn't let me go. I might have been a good surveyor, but they finally actually promoted me to E5 and then let me go. Um, so that's how I wound up over there. I arrived in May of '69, and at the replacement center, there was well, a very short attempt at breaching a perimeter, and I picked up a little bit of shrapnel on the back, but nothing of consequence. I went to the aid station following morning and I encountered a sergeant who said, "Who wants to go up and have fun with the 101st?" I said, "Wow, the 101st, boy, my dad would really be, I think, would be proud of me if he knew I was with the 101st. He had not been, but he was with Patton in World War II. So I said, "Oh, yeah, I'll go." I said, "Well, will they look at my back when I get?" Yeah, they'll look at your back. So fine. I went along and wound up being a replacement at 937 of all places, Hamburger Hill.
Wow.
Got there just at the tail end. Um, that's where they pinned the sergeant that corralled me into the 101st. Was the one that pinned the insignia, the stripes on my collar, and said, "You're an E5." I didn't know anything about a fire team or directing fire or whatever. So I made it in, made it out. And after things got all straightened out, I wound up with the headquarters battery of the 101st, Field Artillery, second of the 320th. And I helped them set up fire bases all over I Corps and on the border of Laos. And did my almost year there. Actually got what do they call it? Shorted out in April.
Right. Right.
And I was actually at Firebase Ripcord when I found out I was supposed to be getting ready to go home. So I made it out. And you mentioned before, you want to know about the welcome home. That was a shock. Arriving at O'Hare, there was a crowd. I was actually on a crutch because I had goofed up my leg at Ripcord and was waiting to have that looked at, but they sent me home. A police officer grabbed me by the scruff of the neck, lost the crutch, shoved me in a baggage closet there in the baggage claim area at O'Hare, and then I was in there with several other returnees, and I was allowed to get out, call my dad to come and get me, and that was a big surprise to him, but he helped me get out, and that was it. That's it in a nutshell.
Were they having like a demonstration at O'Hare?
Yes, yeah, and I was surprised because we hadn't heard anything about that from any of the guys who had come in, who had visited home. No one talked about. The Stars and Stripes, to my recollection, never really talked about protests at home. We didn't know anything about it. Guys who came in weren't saying anything about there being anything against the war. I was there, of course, when there were serious objections on the part of the troops there. They were starting to get very upset about being sent out on operations over and over and over again. The unit that I had arrived with, they had lost so many guys on all these operations prior to Hamburger Hill. That was probably the straw that broke the camel's back, as they say, because there were outright, not mutinies, but just very, very angry meetings on the part of a lot of the infantrymen and even into the artillery troops that just didn't want to go back out anymore. They were just losing a heck of a lot of people. So we just did what we had to do, keep on going.
So I have a couple questions came up when you're talking about how you got into artillery. So you want to join construction, and they said, well, that's full, but we can't really build anything till we blow it up. So you want to go to artillery, or like, what was that sell for how those were close together?
No, I wanted to be in something related to civil engineering. I was very interested in becoming a civil engineer. And I believe it was the recruiting sergeant who told me, yeah, we're going to construction surveying. As it turned out, I found out that construction surveyors didn't really learn how to use the instruments unless they were officers. So I was fortunate to become an artillery surveyor, again, learning how to use all of the instruments that civilian surveyors do. Actually, when I came out, I was able to do some construction surveying here in the States as an engineering intern once I got back into college.
Nice. And in my mind, and I just want to clarify this, it kind of seems like you were living the dream a little there for, what were you, about 19, 20 years old? And your
Let's
job.
see. I was just short of 20 when I went in. So I wouldn't say living the dream. I was
Well,
always interested in being a
yeah,
part of the military, but
just in terms of, in my mind, just as a quick, when you said your job was zeroing in the artillery before it was shipped off, like you would just go out to the range and be like, all right, fire away, move it a little to the right.
we would be told that there would be a shot out, and we were zeroed in with our instruments on what the target was. Sometimes they hit the target first time, sometimes they didn't. You even practice at night, and you'd see a flash way the heck off outside the scope where you were looking at. So the first thing they did was blame us for looking in the wrong place. But naturally, the artillerymen don't want to hear that they missed. But such was the case even over in Nam. They didn't always hit the first time, but they certainly were able to be adjusted and hit what they were supposed to hit.
Yep, got to walk it in a little.
Right.
So, but 19 years old, getting paid to basically hang out and watch stuff blow up. That's a pretty good job for a 19-year-old.
Right. It was it was interesting. We spent, even in Germany, spent a lot of long days, long nights, a lot of time in the field. I was sent back on Operation Reforger to Germany, spent a whole month in the field, just chasing the artillery batteries, setting up, getting ready to zero in their artillery fire, and then moved to another position. Spent a whole month in the snow, never changed uniform. Once in a while, you took your Mickey Mouse boots off, but that maybe prepared me for the way it was over in Nam. You didn't have a change of clothes. I would come back from the field kind of ripped up and scraggly looking, and may or may not have gotten another fresh set of clothes. Sometimes on a fire base, you kind of lined up, everybody stripped off. You got some clothes handed to you. Wasn't your uniform, was a clean pair of clothes, and that was it. But I remember arriving there being told, you brush your teeth with this toothpaste, and you won't have to brush your teeth for a whole year. Okay, sounded good.
Do you have the name of that toothpaste? Or?
No, no, it didn't work. Didn't work. I know that I brushed my teeth a couple times after that, but you just learn to live with what you basically needed. But I spent time having ringworm or picking leeches and stuff like that. You just learn to be dirty. I don't know if that's called living the dream, but it was a different lifestyle.
I would focus more on the hanging out in Germany, blowing stuff up as a dream compared to Vietnam.
Good times. I gained a bunch of weight there. I went up to 165 pounds, drinking great beer, eating pretzels, and having a lot of fun.
Yeah. Germany seems nice. Vietnam, I'll take the dream part out of that. So, but you talk about coming home, and it reminds me one of the gentlemen, Dwayne Bloor, who's been on the podcast and in our film, he talked about when he was landing, he looked out and he saw this big crowd of people, and he thought, oh geez, that's really nice, they're here to welcome me home. They weren't. Found out real quick that they were protesters, and he said that moment just kind of ripped his heart out a little bit. They had no he hadn't heard anything about what was going on back home. And it sounds like you had a bit of the same. You know, you've come home, you're shoved in a closet. I mean, what you were just talking about your mind adapting to being in Vietnam. How does your mind adapt to something like that, where, you know, you think you're coming home to one thing and it's obviously drastically different?
Well, I was certainly proud of the uniform. I was proud of what I had accomplished. Had a few ribbons on my chest. Um, I knew my dad would be proud of the service that I put in. I was surprised. Went well, no, I don't want to badmouth any organization, but the neighbors just weren't very welcoming. They weren't especially enthused about my arrival. I remember my stepmother getting on the phone with one of her sisters and saying, "Oh yeah, Johnny's home. Yeah, no, he never did anything." So, and that was it. So um, my dad, I had always hoped to have a way to talk to my dad or get him to talk about his experiences in World War II, but never get him to open up. And I didn't really open up. He didn't ask a lot of questions, so I didn't have many people to talk to.
And I think, you know, for me growing up, and Dustin, you can say if it was different for you. For me growing up and, you know, being born in the 70s and having teachers who were Vietnam vets, and you think about that moment like we are just talking about at the airport. And obviously in my mind, as someone who wasn't there, I can think about like that day being just a gut check, but it's more of the long-term approach to it of, you know, no one wanting to talk to you. Like how do you settle into that? Do you just kind of bury it down, or did you go find people who had the same experiences, or how can you acclimate to a society that doesn't even want to talk about what you did?
Well, I guess for me, I must have buried it down. We I pretty much broke up with everybody, all my friends that I had uh, been friends with before I went into the service. I just couldn't talk to anyone. I guess I really did bury it down. Met my wife about a year after I came back. We She put up with my screaming nightmares uh, for quite a while, and then helped me to find somebody that helped with PTSD. I actually went to a PTSD clinic at the VA. It had been closed, and I wound up being the only person with a daytime coat and tie job in this circle of other vets who just wanted to talk about the things they did, or what, however many people they encountered in the negative fashion. But there just weren't anybody to really talk to. I returned to college. I joined a fraternity. Nobody ever wanted to talk to me about it. Uh, they they actually never threw. There was a in-house habit of throwing a person in the shower when it was their birthday. They never laid a hand on me. I can't say they were afraid of me. I wasn't a very imposing figure. There were some very big boys there, and they were all younger than me. But nope. Anyway, had no one to really talk to. I did reach out to one person who was there with me at the same time. He wound up being in a suburb very close by. I knew that he had come back, and I called up. I spoke to his mother, and his mom said, Harry doesn't want to talk to anybody. He's unfortunately passed away. I have never encountered anyone that I served over there with. I've tried and tried, but never. Encountered in Germany, I encountered a person I went to high school with, and he told me his brother was over there. And actually, I encountered who I thought was his brother, but could have been his ghost. Anyway, we didn't have anybody to really talk to. Anyway, mine's all clear. I welcome home the brothers as I see them. I thank them for their service. I encounter people wearing a hat. I'll wear a hat when I go to Costco and Jewel, just to encounter other vets and thank them for their service and welcome them home.
Well, and that does lead me to a question. We've been working on our project for 5 years now, maybe 6. I like to round it. And even in the time we've been working on it, we have seen a shift in how Vietnam veterans are viewed and maybe welcomed more. And you see more people wearing, hats, Vietnam veteran hats. And is that us just being more aware of it? Like, have you noticed a change in maybe even more recently in how Vietnam veterans are welcomed? And is that heartening to you? Or, some people we talk to think it's too little too late. Like, what has that been like to watch it come around?
What I see most is the eyes shift away. They'll see Vietnam, you could just see their eyes look away. I rarely encounter people who will say thanks for your service, or they don't say welcome home, but boy, I can count on one hand when we go on vacation or something, that people, whether they're waitresses or people in stores or people that I encounter, they just won't say anything. But most often you'll see the eyes look away. I've had it was a while back, some little kid in a shopping cart at Jewel said, "Mommy, what's that?" And she's, "No, don't talk." I should mention I did reestablish friendship with 2 of my high school buddies. One was my best friend. He was over there at the same time that I was, and then also this other guy was. One was down in Cameron Bay. The other was maybe somewhere in 3 Corps. Neither of them experienced things that I did, but we'll get together. My best friend will get together with me. We're going to see him again in a couple weeks. He and I will wear the hat. And he's very active down in Florida with veterans organizations. Said it's much different down there, and he noticed when he comes up here, people don't say much, don't say a word. So it doesn't bother me. I know that they might either be uncomfortable. Most of them are young. I do encounter, as I said, vets and welcome them home. Sometimes you encounter one and they look at you as if to say, what do you mean? I actually had a guy when I said, "Welcome home, brother," and he looked at me as if I was speaking some foreign language. So maybe people don't often greet us, but it doesn't bother me. I don't wear the hat to give anybody a hard time. I just wear it to encounter hopefully other vets, and I quite often do.
And part of that could be, and even we feel it sometimes, and we've talked to so many different veterans, and we've had the talk sometimes of, we like to say, thank you for your service should be the start of the conversation, and too many times it seems to be the entire conversation. Like, it's such a reflexive thing. Like, I want to point out, I love the show Shark Tank, and I think it's really great when they do this, but whenever there's a veteran on, well, at least one shark has to be like, "First, let me say thank you for your service." And then before the moment's even over, "Now tell me about your SKUs." And it's like, it's so quite, I mean, it's such a I think it's great that they do it. I do not want to badmouth them doing that, but it's just so reflexive, like it's gone before it's even started. And it seems like it could be like, "Hey, thanks for your service. Like, I'd love to hear what you did."
Or even like, how are you coping with being back in the world? Like, like that to me is the more important part. Like,
but as a veteran, how do you feel when someone would say it, like maybe in the store, just "Thank you for your service," or a random encounter, shall we say?
Well, I find it hard to know how to reply. I kind of stumble on saying, "Well, thank you for the acknowledgement," or just "thank you." How do you really respond? So I'll just say, kind of, "Thanks," and I mean, I'll give them a sincere look in the eye and thank them. I've rarely, if ever, gotten a follow-up question I do recall one gentleman saying, one young man saying, what were you in? So I just told him Army, and he told me actually he was going in a short while after that. But yeah, it's we don't. I haven't encountered on Facebook a couple of vet comments on one of the Vietnam pages that people they don't know what to say back. Um, you could just nod. Hey, we're not going to be around for forever, and the people we encounter that know who we are and came from our same time, they were either for or against us, and maybe that's why they keep their mouth shut. Everybody else, all the younger people, don't really know much about what it was that we did. Or I've gone to school, been invited by my grandkids to come to school and on Veterans Day, and I will encounter other vets and get the same kind of experiences. We're not uncomfortable, but it's just odd to be acknowledged by a bunch of little school kids who really don't know what it's all about.
Right.
The teachers will be a little more sincere and meaningful in their thanks, but you know, okay, we try to teach the kids what we do or what we did, and just to respect the service that we put in.
Yeah. How old were the kids that you would go to talk to?
Oh, they range, oh my goodness, probably first, second grade. I've also done high school.
Okay.
Oh boy, you know, after a while, I forgot about, I taught some college classes for a while. Never, ever mentioned that I was a Vietnam vet. Never came up. There was no need for it. I don't know what difference it would have made. As I said, all through college, never mentioned it, never used it in any fashion as a way to get good grades or be on the end. But when I took survey courses, I was top of the class. I did go into a couple of classes where I used my survey skills, so I was able to show that I knew what I was doing.
Yep. You had a bit more real life experience than many of the students.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, for first grade, that's a fun time to talk. I mean, I used to work law enforcement, so I went in a couple times on the, tell the kids what your parents do day. I was like, oh, darn right, I'm going to take advantage of letting the boys know what I used to do for the future when they want to date my daughters. So it paid off. They were scared of me. But yeah, it's a fun time to talk to first graders about police work and their understanding of it compared to talking to high schoolers. I actually prefer talking to the first graders these days. But I guess looking at that in terms of the thank you for your service or wanting to say something, I guess it's just some small way, if people could, I don't want to say personalize it, because obviously you're just seeing someone in a store, but to let them know that you actually do want, not just a reflexive thing that seems like the thing to say and then it's awkward because do you mean it, and or are you saying this because you think you had to, like some way to let the veteran know, like, hey, I actually do want to thank you, like it's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for what you did.
Yeah, it used to bother me at first when I saw the eyes look away, that because I didn't know if they were uncomfortable, if we were scary. I had hoped that people wouldn't label us as some of them did way back then as baby killers, but I've never ever had that thrown at me here since I came back. In the early days, if I wore, if I had my poncho liner and went to the beach, I'd hear some people go, "Hey, oh, there's a vet." But that was about it. I think there was a different feeling about us back in '70. So we probably weren't accepted or weren't appreciated.
Do you think that changed how much you went out?
It changed on what I carried. I didn't want to be, it angered me at first, because as I said, I was proud of my service. I was
Right.
proud of the uniform. So I put the poncho liner away and didn't haul it with me if I was going to go out to the beach or go lay in the park or something. So that just bothered me. I wore a field jacket when I was in college upon my return, but it wasn't a Vietnam type field jacket. I had a couple fatigues, and I didn't wear those. I wore an Eisenhower jacket that I had picked up back in Germany. So
Yeah.
it was pretty ragged, but that's what I wore, and that was kind of acceptable because people were wearing the stateside or Germany type non camouflage fatigues. But I probably never wore my Vietnam fatigue for anything like yard work or anything like
Right.
that. It's hanging in the basement. But if I worked around in the fall and just needed something light, I'll put on a 24th Infantry from Germany. Got one in the garage. And it's not that I don't want to be identified. It's just never thought of pulling it out and wearing it. It's there. And
Sure. Yeah. No, you just change your behavior to fit in, right? That's how
Mhm.
we operate. Man, that's interesting. What did you end up doing once you got out of college? Where'd life take you?
I went to Illinois Institute of Technology, got a
Yeah.
bachelor's in civil engineering, and then I went to Midwest College of Engineering and picked up a master's in engineering management. I was a civil engineer then. I designed road projects, anything on the ground other than bridges, anything drainage, lighting, traffic signals, all that sort of work. I worked for the Illinois Tollway for about 9.5 years, and the rest of my experience was with a variety of consulting firms. Um, so I put my skills to good use. I spent my entire career doing nothing but using a red pencil. I never had to use all of the highfalutin math that we learned in college. Never, ever used even algebra. I might have used geometry, but none of the Diffie-Q or any kind of equations that we learned, any of the calculus. I knew it had an application, but I never needed it. I made my career just with a red pencil.
Wow. What was your favorite kind of work? Traffic patterns or?
My favorite kind of work was multi-lane expressways, multi-lane local streets, things that had a turn lane. I liked to put together the construction sequencing, but then my favorite thing to do is review plans. I became very experienced at taking a set of plans and finding the inconsistencies that were almost always there, because a set of plans is put together with a variety of different engineering disciplines.
Right.
And most of the time I found that the individual disciplines didn't talk to each other. So the drainage guys would do their work properly and correctly, but they might put all their sewers on the right side of the road, and then here come the lighting guys. Where are they going to put it? On the right side of the road. So you have light poles right through the sewers, and I would spot that immediately. And I guess I made a lot of enemies because they didn't have the right way to go about telling them that something had to change.
Right.
And I knew that they had expended the budget. So now they had to come back and either go in the hole to correct or to correct their work and make it work properly so that it wouldn't have change orders out in the field, or the firm would lose money. I managed a major project for the Illinois Tollway, in which some of the firms really lost money making corrections on the plans. It wasn't a happy thing to do, but that's what I did. And I think I can credit my skills to what I learned in the service, just how to quickly read a map and know which way you're supposed to be going and
Right.
which way is up.
Say, all right, I'm going to flip a coin. Heads, lighting, tail, sewer. whoever comes up's moving to the other side of the street.
Well, no, yeah, there's a right place and a wrong place, and you can put the sewer lights on the same side as the sewer, but you just don't put them in the same place so many feet behind the curb.
Yeah.
And it could be done, but all too often you'd find the manholes every 200 feet, and where would the light poles be? Every 200 feet, right smack on top of the manhole. It was so the easiest thing for me to do. It was a skill that I actually taught classes in how to do that. I would have a challenge with some of the people that I'd say, bring in a set of plans, go to that set of plans and find 5 or 6 or 7 locations and mark those locations. And if you don't find a conflict, dinner's on me. I never lost that bet. They would be surprised. So how did you know that? It's always there. Contractors have change orders for a reason. It's because there are inconsistencies, anomalies in the plans.
It's better to find it in the planning stage than the implementation stage.
And I can recall even going back to 1 or 2 types of incidents over in Nam where somebody wasn't reading the map correctly and had the guns pointed completely the wrong way. Fortunately, it occurred at a fire base along the coast, but yeah, they were doing fish in the open rather than the target out there on the mainland.
That's a good segue back to one of the only questions I have for you about your NOM experience, which is what was the procedure of setting up a fire base? Did you go in first to observe and set things up, or how'd that work?
Yeah, I would be with one of the first couple of choppers that went in. I'd have to set up an instrument, and naturally I wouldn't try to set it up standing up tall. You learn how to set it up low. Every fire base had a known point. Every fire base had an observable spot that you could turn your instrument to, so that you could turn between the known point and maybe there was a top of a hill, top of a mountain, a steeple somewhere far off, a bridge corner. So your instrument was very powerful. It had a good telescope on it. So you got your angle set, and then you either read the map or you read the azimuth, the direction to that known point, and then you could determine where was true north, where was the actual map north. From there, you knew where the coordinates of the fire base were. You measured off to try to find the center of that fire base and establish the known position of that fire base. Then the guns started coming in. They were offloaded, and the gun crews would set them up, and you have to then use your instrument and look at each gun. Each of the 6 guns, they each had an instrument on the gun. You would give them an azimuth to read to you, and then everyone could turn in the same direction because they knew the direction they were looking at.
Cool.
But yeah, we were the first ones in, and it always surprised me that we weren't other than the last one, Firebase Ripcord, that we were not the first ones that were wiped out. They didn't care about us. They cared about wiping out the guns. When the guns got all set up, that's when the fun started. So you would hopefully do your job. And there was sometimes I had to stay overnight. If I didn't catch the last chopper out, okay, fine, I had to stay overnight. And I helped pull guard duty and hunker down in the bunkers if I had to, but just hoped that you could get your job done and that everything worked right. There was, I mentioned the anger or the disruption or the, not mutiny, but just the attitudes that changed in the 60s, even in the early 70s. There were times when the gun batteries didn't listen to the captain, and they didn't set their guns on the exact azimuth that they were supposed to, and so they would, quote, miss the target, unquote. Their hope was to get rid of the captain, have him replaced. They would naturally blame me and say I did a poor survey, but I always proved that I did it right. And I don't know what happened to the gun crews, but things like that would happen.
Wow.
Do you ever look at today's GPS technology and think, man, That would have made my job a lot easier.
Sure, sure. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, we didn't have things like satellites. I mean, back in the early days of artillery computers, it was housed in a semi-trailer. It was the FADEC computer was a huge thing, and all it could do was tell which way is north or measure distance. It
And
could do that.
this phone probably has more computing power than that
Oh yeah,
semi.
sure, definitely, definitely. Yeah, there were a couple of electronic instruments that they taught us in survey school about, but they were too expensive to use in the field. We never used them.
And we were actually just talking to last week, we were talking to one of the lieutenants that we've been following, and he was saying even now in adulthood, he's just been surprised how mobile fire bases were. Sometimes they were just set up for a very short, I mean, they were up, they were down, they were moved. Like they were a on the move type of, you hear fire base and you think, oh, they dug it out and they built a base there. Like, no, sometimes it's just drop a gun on top of some hills for a couple of days type
Right.
of thing.
Well, we were adjacent to the border of Laos, and we knew there were a lot of targets in Laos. In fact, there was a section of the Ho Chi Minh Trail that you could get up in a helicopter or a bird dog, and you could actually see the movement on the trail. And once in a while, they would set up an operation where they'd move some, occupy some fire bases, and then move in some 155s or mobile artillery, and then they would post me and a few rangers out into Laos where we weren't supposed to be, and we would call in fire on specific grid sections that were already used before, so everybody knew if you were in grid Bravo or grid Delta, whatever, they knew what coordinates they had to hit. So there would be a bunch of slamming and damming to hit that portion of the trail that we would call in, and you would see a whole bunch of stuff, people and carts and oxen, and can't remember if I ever saw any elephants, but anyway, you would call in the fire and then just get the heck out of there.
Wow. That sounds exciting, and the exciting isn't always good kind of way.
Well, I guess that might have been a basis for the screaming nightmares later on, but I'm here, got out.
Yeah.
And actually, I want to segue. Well, first, let me ask you, I know that all my years as a firearms instructor and law enforcement have done a number on my hearing. How is it for the artillery observers?
Well, there was no such thing as earplugs. I don't know if I've got about a 30% hearing loss. I don't know if it was related to artillery being on the guns all the time, or the time I spent prior to going over there. We in Germany, we fired off one heck of a lot of rounds in M14s. They had a surplus they had to get rid of, and I enjoyed the M14. I was got very good at it. But I fired one heck of a lot of rounds, so the ringing in my ears is still there. So Uncle Sam rated me at 30%, or no, hearing loss. I forget, it was 10% or whatever. But I have 30% hearing loss, 10% VA compensation for that. So it makes it kind of hard to hear. Sometimes in the very early days, I was really bothered by it, but you just kind of live with it.
Yeah, I have 20% and consistent with constant exposure to loud noises. So we all know where it came from, but the government won't admit it. But the problem is I've lost a lot of the frequency of the female voice, and I only have daughters who mumble because they're teenagers. So
I should tell my wife that. That's I can't hear you because you're female. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. My daughters
as an observer from the outside, it doesn't play out as well as you think.
No, they're like, you should have your hearing checked. I did. And so yeah, my daughters, they're 15, they'll like mumble looking away from me, and I'm like, yeah. You're gonna have to try that one again.
Well, I've been married 48 years, so we've learned to communicate.
Yeah. Yeah,
Congratulations.
I always laughed that when before I had my hearing checked, that when I didn't hear my wife, it was because I needed to have my hearing checked. But when I didn't hear her, or when I didn't hear her, it was I need my hearing checked. But when she didn't hear me, it's because I need to speak up. That's how. So, um, but segueing, one thing I want to talk about, and we mentioned that you have your book, Potato People.
Yes.
One of our veterans that we've talked to, Craig Jorgensen,
Here.
there we go, available on Amazon.
Yeah, it was self-published, so they charge too much. Yeah, you can get it on Amazon. I'd be happy to help coordinate,
Okay.
because I've got a garage full of copies that are available. So yeah, it's
Okay.
out there.
Yeah,
But
we'll
please
coordinate and we'll put a link in the description for the podcast for anyone who's listening. Look below. It'll be done in the future, but at the point you're listening to, it's there. But the question I have is, like, one of our guys that we've talked to, Craig Jorgensen, has written a lot of books, and we've always remarked that he seems to be, I'm trying to find the right way to say this. I don't want to say farther along. He can talk more comfortably about his experiences than some of the other veterans we've talked to, who only started talking when we started this project. And he does credit some of that to sitting down to write the books. And that was kind of his first. It wasn't an intentional thing, like, I'm going to get this out for that aspect. He wanted to write the books, but he did notice a benefit to the writing the books. For you, how did it come about? You said, I'm going to write this book, and did you notice benefits from that for your own personal side of it?
Okay, the reason I wrote the book is it was kind of on a dare in the barracks in either in Germany or Fort Riley. Some of the bizarre things that we did in the stateside and Germany-based service. No one would believe the unfortunate waste of money that occurred. So I said, someday I'm going to write a book. And this guy named Fitz said, what are you going to call it? And I said, it's going to call it Potato People. Why? Well, because we eat a lot of potatoes. That's the way I phrased it. Early on, being invited to speak at high schools, I couldn't talk about it without coming to tears. It was really hard. Going to the middle school, where my wife was a social worker here in the school district, so I was invited to teach it or to make a presentation on Veterans Day or whatever to middle schoolers, 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. Even then, if they would ask some really tough questions, and I was embarrassed to break down in tears, or couldn't speak without choking up. It never occurred with little kids. They don't ask that kind of question. So writing the book, no, I got it all out of actual letters that I had written to a girl that I broke up with when I came back. She gave me back the letters when we broke up, and I compiled them with the letters that I had written to my dad, who saved them and gave them to me. And so I had almost a day-to-day kind of, not really day-to-day, but a lot of recollections on just what I went through and put it all down. So it's 800 and something pages. Surprised the heck out of me when I hit 322,000 words. But anyway, I did it. I should edit it a couple more times, because even and the editing, my goodness, the editors, the goofy questions that they would ask, and the things that they made me take out of the book because it made them uncomfortable. I'm saying, like,
Wow.
okay, they said, oh, you can't say that. No, we don't want these. I could tell they were just very young people doing their job. But hey, I thought, okay, fine. Actually, it's the third book I've written. I wrote a fairy tale book for my granddaughter way back when, and then I wrote an engineering book, just kind of what I call a brain dump on just how to do what I was doing. And so I would call this a brain dump. Just got rid of a lot of memories. Not got rid of, put them down, and the kids have all read it. My friends have read it, and it's there. But I touch on many things that we did, and just the situations that I was in, and the things that we did. Not bragging, not boasting, just hopefully not too boringly factual, but there it was.
Well, and it's funny when you talk about the editors saying this makes us uncomfortable. I mean, we had a screening at the Museum of Flight in Tukwila at Boeing on Veterans Day a couple of years ago, and in the question and answer period, a woman, and I want to be really careful how I say this because I'm not bashing her, because it's a very legitimate thing. It's conversations we'd had in production when editing it. She asked, there's a scene where we talk, what a veteran gives a very, very factual account of what it was like to go out on a downed helicopter scene. Very factual, I'll put it that way. It is raw, and it's incredibly powerful, but and we have a recording of a helicopter getting shot down, and it very much ties into what's being said. It's not just a random, let's throw this in. But we had conversations of, man, this is pretty raw, and but we decided to go with it, and she was berating us a little for, why does it have to be so raw, and did we have to do that? And my answer was, well, yes, because this is their story. Like, I would be doing a disservice if I didn't, like, how can I tell how hard it was to come home if I shield the parts that made it hard? Like, don't tell you, like, this is what you have to know. And
Right.
you know, and she did get on the, I can't believe there's children in here, and I was like, well, those are my daughters. Like, there's no way they weren't going to come to this film screening. And I left it out, and I kind of wish I'd said it, but I left it out. I was like, you know, you look at my daughters, they were 13 then. You know, unfortunately, the two 13-year-old girls are the closest in age to what these guys were when they went through this than anyone else in this room. These guys were 19, 20 years old. Like, you know, this is a real thing.
A couple of the things that my one friend that I get together with from down in Florida talk about is the attitudes that we had. You would never let anybody know you were afraid. We would make fun of each other. You would bolster each other's courage, if you will. I don't recall encountering many people who were able to express fear. You just did what you did so that nobody would make fun of you or call you any kind of names. And then in terms of the operations and things, you know, think of the term search and destroy. What does that mean to you? You know, the editors didn't like what that meant. And I won't do it for this recording, but we can off the record talk about some of the phrases that they didn't like to hear, or some of the things you talk about visiting the downed helicopter. Well, yeah, think about what you have to do after a battle occurs. There's some things that make people uncomfortable, and yeah, they again may have been part of the nightmares that I had. They were psychedelic. Trees were bleeding. The ground was bleeding. I remember those kind of things, and I remember how palpable the blue cloud was that I finally got rid of when I was able to get rid of that PTSD. It was a big help for my wife to do that, but I could almost reach out and touch it when it was just gone. I was somewhat attracted back to it because it had been there for years. I didn't get rid of it till a little after 1990. So it was there for a long time. And I remember even in the frat, there was only one guy who would room with me. Nobody else wanted to, because I would wake up screaming. So anyway, there's things you can say to people, and there's things you can't.
Yeah. Yeah. And we decided to lean into the things you're not supposed to, because if we're going to have the conversation, I mean, in our view, if we're going to have the conversation, we're going to have the conversation. Like, there's
The one thing that makes us some commonality between us and Afghan vets is they burn their crap too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that will always be. Yeah, we won't say the term for that duty.
Right.
Yeah.
But even an E5, even as an E5, I had to do it. So that's why I didn't. That's one of the reasons I didn't mind going to the fire bases, because back in the rear, that's all they made you do was police call and stuff like that. I didn't even KP, for goodness sake. But no, I would volunteer to go out on anything just to get away from that. And so it wasn't seeking reward. It was getting away from the stuff that I had put up with for a year and a half prior to going over there.
Yep. Yeah. That little time on your own out in the jungle.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of translates into a lust for experience, like a real willingness to live life on life's terms.
Yeah, I guess you would call it that, because think of the food. Out in the boonies, we were eating sea rats, and okay, back in the rear, you had powdered eggs, powdered bread. There wasn't great food, but at least once in a while you might have had some bacon or something like that. But I lived on sea rats for a long time in Germany and even on field operations in the States. So I didn't mind them. I knew what to pick out. So I knew what to load up in my trouser pockets and what to trade for better things on the fire bases. And you'd get things like those packages that would come in, huge box of cigarettes and candy and writing paper and shoelaces and shoe powder, shoe polish, whatever, all kind of stuff would come in. So I was a real heavy smoker over there, but cigarettes were a common tradable item. And yeah, you would trade them to the Vietnamese and you would get things in return, but that's just the way it was.
So after living on those sea rats, did you when you got back home, did you have like a meal that you had to go get?
Well, I remember the meal we had when we came back. I knew the steak. I couldn't chew the steak because I hadn't not eaten that kind of solid food for a long time, and I think I got sick on that first meal. But yeah, things that I missed. Silly things, perhaps like raisin bread. I really like raisin bread. Grapefruit juice. I had that in Germany and the States, but didn't have that over there. So I really liked that. I had hepatitis over there, so I couldn't drink beer anymore. I beered up in Germany and in the States, but caught hep over there. And so I couldn't drink for a long time. Even at my wedding, I couldn't drink. What else? I caught fever of unknown origin. I thought it was malaria, but they never really said it was that. And that came back once a year, every year for a long time. So it stopped happening. Well, not that long ago, but every fall I would get it. So you bring back some things, Some things
Did they let you name it? If it was unknown, did you get the name of the fever?
Origin, yeah, fever, FUO, fever of unknown origin.
When I worked at Customs, I got something. I was sick for a month, running 102, 103 degree fever. My neck was swollen. I think I had 14, 15 blood draws. They tested for mumps, everything. Couldn't find. Yeah, and they said, have you gone anywhere like tropical? No. And then have you been around anyone? I'm like, only like 10 hours a day, every day for the last. And said, well, you got something that we've never ever seen before. And so I said, oh, do I get to name it? Like, and they said that you don't want a disease named after yourself. And I said, well, A, let's talk about that. But B, why do you think I'm going to name it after myself? I got a whole list.
Case of the Dave.
Yeah, I got the Dave. So, but talking, we were actually just talking earlier about how you called it the blue cloud, and how you did overcome your PTSD. We always like to ask if you have any advice for maybe it's other Vietnam veterans who haven't talked. There's still plenty of Vietnam veterans who have not talked at all, even all these 50 some years later. Or maybe it's a newer, a modern day veteran coming back from the Middle East. Any advice you have as someone who's gone through this, successfully gone through? I mean, it's a relative term for everyone, so I don't want you to be uncomfortable for me putting that word on there, but who's gone through this and found a modicum of success with this? Do you have advice for other veterans who may be facing this?
Yes, I would say just talk about it. Um, for me, it was a long time in coming. I attended uh, two different PTSD groups at VA hospital. And unfortunately, in the first group, I was the sole survivor. Each person either was incarcerated or something happened. Either they committed suicide or they succumbed to drugs or whatever. So that first group just wasn't there. I was the last guy standing. So the person started another one, and we would talk, and it really didn't. They were mostly boastful about just what they would do on a search and destroy mission, or boastful about the unit. I remember one young man had an immense tattoo placed on his arm, and then we found out he had to have his arm amputated. It was too big a tattoo. But talk about it. Talk to other vets. Talk about what's bothering you. Because there was a specific incident that I knew was at the root of what was bothering me, and I finally sat down with a friend of my wife's, another social worker, after talking to other counselors and priests and doctors and whatever. And this person said, sorry. So he said, wow. So he said, so someday you'll see him again. Sorry. Anyway, talk about it. Just have to talk about it. Talk about it with others who've been there, or other vets. I don't know how to relate to an Afghan vet or Iraq war vet, but if there are certain common things that happen, being under a mortar barrage or a rocket attack, or incoming rounds on the perimeter, just talk about it. Talk about how you feel. Darn what, right? You were probably afraid, and you probably didn't want to admit to somebody you were afraid. You're never gonna say, "Hey, get me out of here. I'm done. I'm tired of this." But yeah, you should probably talk about it. Sorry.
Well, yeah, I mean, we talked about that with Dr. Roy Clymer, who used to be head of specialized care at Walter Reed. He's a Vietnam vet, but we talked to him for the movie, and we're, like you're talking, there's not a lot of direct crossover between the jungles of Vietnam and the highland mountains of Afghanistan or the desert of Iraq in terms of just straight across the board experience. But when I was talking with Dr. Clymer, where I was talking about how I had gotten into it with the supervisor at customs, like he'd really pissed me off. And I finally said, well, last time I checked, this is your job. Like, maybe you should be the one fixing it. I mean, much longer story. And I was asked to go finish my paperwork after that. But he said, yeah, see, you weren't in the Army and I wasn't in customs, but I'm sure we can find a lot of commonalities talking about government supervisors who really pissed us off, or government waste. Like, there's a lot of commonality that we can find. And there's a lot of commonality for a veteran from Vietnam and a veteran from Afghanistan. Is it about hand-to-hand combat in the jungle? No, not across the board, but there's, like you're talking about, an artillery barrage, or your friend didn't come back. Like there's a lot of commonality of experience, of feelings, of emotions that veterans across the board, across the service, across conflicts can definitely talk about. And as a non-veteran, like I said, I can definitely commiserate with chain of command issues, and there are commonalities that can be found.
Yeah, definitely. I think one issue that we might have in common is you feel a sense of you want to blame somebody when one of your buddies doesn't come back. There's probably that as a common feeling that might be something for them to talk about. Who do you blame, and is it really their fault that your buddy didn't come back, or if your buddy made a mistake, didn't listen to one of the old timers and stepped in the wrong place, or didn't, we would take 2 steps and look around, take 2 steps and look around. You didn't just go walking on a trail. I took a long time to get rid of that, boy. I'll tell you, we would go out for a walk in the forest preserve or whatever in the early days, and it would return as soon as I got into the trees. It would return. But you have to talk about just what's bothering you, and it might just be one thing, or it might be a lot of things. But I think it's good to talk about the good times, talk about the bad times. You could start by talking about the sea rats or whatever they eat over there, or talk about the uniform and all. My goodness, all the stuff they wear nowadays. We didn't have a tenth of that. You're worried about taking 10 mags and your boots and a either a boonie cap or a helmet, and you didn't care about a flak vest. You didn't care about one canteen. That was enough for me. You had common things that you could talk about.
Yeah, exactly. Dustin, you had something there? Or?
No, I was just agreeing with Jack. The experience is the same even if the locations are different. Yeah.
Sure, life is short. Enjoy it when you can. That's it.
It sure is.
Exactly. I mean, Dustin and I have both been through that. I mean, I wasn't going to say anything, Dustin, but part of the reason we've had a break is Dustin actually did just lose his mother. And that's why I was down in New Mexico. But the reason I bring it up is the commonality. Both Dustin and I had dinner, I with my dad and Dustin with his mom the night before, and everything was fine, and we were making plans. And then the next day, a heart incident in the kitchen. It's actually shocking, the commonality between our 2 parents like that. But it did. I've had more time. It's been many more years for me, but that was part of my impetus for leaving the government. Is here I am. I had dinner with my dad. We're talking about the upcoming Seahawks season, everything else, and then he was gone the next day. Gone. And I looked around and I thought, my dad was CEO of the family business and this great legacy. And I was a GS-13, step 2. I was supervisor, had my own office, ran my own teams. And I kind of looked around and thought, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, people will say that's sad, and they're going to promote someone to take my place. And that government cog is going to keep on moving. And that didn't sit well with me. And, it's like, this is not, I adored my coworkers. I miss my coworkers. I don't miss the government. But I just I was like, this isn't what I've set up for. And you never know how long life is. So go out and do the things you want to do and go for it.
Right. That's right.
And here we are. So I called up Dustin and I said, hey, this movie thing, like, are we doing it or not? So, and we started screenwriting, and now we have a podcast. All very linear.
Working out.
So, but thank you so much for joining us today, Jack. Wonderful conversation. That's, we talked before we came on of how we have, a theme that we like to cover, but we just kind of let the conversation go. And even though we have a theme that we like to go for the podcast, everyone is different. And it's always so fun to just learn all these new stories, and it's never the same. And I think that's what's so great. And that's why I love doing this. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Dave. I appreciate it very much. Dustin, nice to meet you.
And to our audience, thank you so much for being with us for yet another episode of the Know Their Story podcast. If you enjoy what we're doing, give us a follow, a like, rating, tell your friends, enemies, whoever will listen. But anywhere you can get your podcasts. And again, Jack's book is Potato People. As mentioned, you can find it on Amazon. We'll put a link as well for where you can
find we'll put a link to Jack where Jack's selling them so you can get them out of your garage.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. I'd probably have almost 100 copies I picked up on a deal, but do not pay full price. Go find it on Amazon, find it on eBay or whatever. I even have a link to electronic version that you could get for free. So
all right,
we'll work something out.
We'll put those links in there. Dustin, got your jokes that I can cut off?
Oh,
Go
man.
ahead and stay with us here, Jack. I'm just going to cut off the recording feed, but we'll talk a little more.
Let's see. One oyster and another oyster walk into a bar, and the bartender turns to them and says,
You've been listening to the Know Their Story podcast. If you made it this far, we must be doing something right. Let us know by subscribing to our channel.
And think about sitting down with the veterans in your life, because saying thank you for your service should be the beginning of the conversation, not the end.